Welcome to Furniture Flipping for Profit. I'm Cynthia. Here you will learn how to refinish, restore, and restyle used furniture and then flip it for a profit. A lot of times when I see used furniture for sale at various sources, it's in pretty bad condition. And this is a good example of that. This particular piece of furniture has gotten wet and the MDF or particle board has swollen. And so it's got these lumps and bumps all over it. It's really awful. And most people would walk away from this. This was for sale at the Restore Store for $8. Quite honestly, I was glad that they put it up for sale as opposed to just throwing it in the trash, because it is salvageable. And that's what I'm going to teach you on this video, is how to repair all of this swollen wood and how to repair particle board. I see drawers sometimes that are split, and I'm going to teach you how to repair those as well, so that in the end, you'll have a piece of furniture that looks like it was brand new, and yet you paid very little for it. So I thank you for coming by and watching my video. If you get anything from my video today, please give me a thumbs up, and I would encourage you to subscribe as well, so that as I produce new videos, you'll become notified about them. Giving me a thumbs up and subscribing supports my channel and allows me the opportunity to continue to provide videos like this for you. So thank you for your support. Bye. Hi, I wanted to remind you to be certain to wear a mask. There are a lot of chemicals that they use in the creation of MDF and particle board, and they can be toxic. So be certain to wear a mask to protect your lungs. Now, what did I do? I fixed the broken area on the end, and I showed you how I glued it, and then I sanded it down. Yes, you can use a hand sander. I used an electric sander as well. Actually, it's battery operated sander. And then it was still a little rough, so I filled it in with some wood filler, and that's my favorite wood filler. I really, really like that. I've tried like 10 different kinds. I really like that. Now, what did I do? I sanded down all the swollen areas on this dresser, and I used 80 grit, and then I switched to 60 grit sandpaper. And it worked really well taking it down. But the thing I want to point out to you is what you're looking for to know when you've sanded down enough. You don't want to just remove the elevation. In other words, if there's just a line around it and you see the elevated area is a lighter color, that's not good enough. You have to sand it down until it's all blended in with the finish itself. So you can see that it's just very gradually going to the finish. So I really wanted to make sure that it was smooth, and it's important that you do that. I also sanded the rest of this, scuff sanded it's called, the rest of the top, because this is a Formica top. In order to paint Formica furniture, you must scuff sand it. In other words, just go over it and make it feel rough. And then after I sanded the entire top and got it all nice and smooth, you notice I switched to 220 grit. I wish you could feel this, because before I switched to 220 grit, it felt like I was rubbing my hand over a paper bag. It was rough. But when you I switched to the 220 grit because it closes the pores of the MDF or the particle board, and now it feels really very, very smooth. I probably won't need to use any wood putty on it or anything. It's amazing how smooth it feels. In fact, it feels more smooth than the Formica, since the Formica's been scuff sanded. There's one little area that has a dent in it that I'm touching right now. That's going to have to be filled in with a little bit of wood filler, and then I need to sand the edges here. I'll do that by hand because there's a little bit of an edge here, right here along the edge, right here, and I want to make sure that I keep that. I don't want it to be rounded. Worst case scenarios, I would just sand it round if I did make it round. So I'm going to sand that by hand just to get rid of all the rough areas and the nicked areas. If I need to, again, I may use a little bit of wood putty. Then I am going to put 2 coats of primer on this, and I'm going to use water-based primer. I don't have to use oil-based primer because it's not been stained, so there's no problem with potentially bleed through of the tannins. So I'll just use water-based primer, 2 coats, and you can apply the primer with a foam brush, you can apply it with a regular brush, you can apply it with a roller, like, you know, a 6-inch roller or a 4-inch roller. You can also get it on. So anyhow, that's what I'm going to do for the next steps, and then I'll be back with you. Bye. Hello again. So we've now applied 2 coats of the water-based primer. I've allowed it to completely dry, and now we're ready to go on with the next step. When I run my hand over this, it has a little burr to it. You can feel little bumps and burrs as I describe them. And that's the sawdust that was in the air, and that's dust particles and things that got caught in the primer. So I'm going to sand that very lightly using a 220 grit sandpaper, and just to take that smooth. And you'll feel it after you've sanded it. You'll feel it. You'll feel that it is much smoother. So it makes a big difference when you do that. The first step, though, is how do you know when it's dry? Of course, you need to allow enough time for it to dry based on whatever the recommendation is for the product that you're using. But there are a couple of ways you can test that even then. The humidity, the heat, the temperature in the room, all of those can affect the drying times. That's why you need to have some ways to determine for sure that it's dry before you sand it. So first of all, the color, the sheen to the primer, to the dresser top in this case, it becomes very dull. When it's wet, it's shiny. When it's dry, it's dull. And then the second thing is touch it. If it feels wet, it's wet. If you get some paint on your hands, it's obviously wet. And the third thing is sand a little bit of it. And if you sand it and nothing comes off on the sandpaper, it's definitely dry. But if you see the actual paint, in this case primer, starting to come off in the sandpaper, that means it's still wet. So stop, give it at least another half hour, try it again. So I'm going to go ahead and sand this now very lightly. And then I'm going to use a damp cloth just to remove all of the dust. We don't want any dust left on there. And then you can also use a tack cloth if you want, but you need to get rid of the dust. And then I'm going to paint it with chalk paint. Now when I use chalk paint, when I apply chalk paint, I use one of 3 ways. I brush it on, I use a roller, I use a 6-inch or a 4-inch roller, 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch, or you can buy cans of chalk paint, spray paint. You can use that, or you can use an HVLP sprayer to actually spray it on. So those are different ways you can do it. You can also roll it on with foam roller, but I don't really like that method. I like the other 3 better. So I'm going to actually brush it on. After I've put 2 to 3 coats on, I'm going to wait till it dries again, and then I'm going to sand it again very lightly, because again, I want that nice smooth surface. And then I'm going to put a top coat on. I will be using polyurethane satin finish. I like that. I use the satin finish because it's less expensive, because I can buy gallons of that. If I use a matte finish, I can only get a quart, so it's much cheaper to use gallon. But I just like the finish. It's a really nice finish. It's a tough finish. I always put polyurethane finish on the top of a dresser because that gets the most wear and tear. Believe me, every dresser I get, the top is damaged, and I buy them used for a very inexpensive price. So of course I'm not buying top quality things to refinish. But that's always what happens. The top gets damaged. So if you put polyurethane on it or polyacrylic, that will help to protect it. So those are the next steps. Go ahead and watch them and learn how to refinish this. One last thing, I want to point out that this top is now very smooth. You would never know that it was damaged from the beginning, the before picture. It's amazing how just sanding it, as I've already taught you, makes such a difference. This dresser is going to be absolutely amazing when I finish with it. For this video, I'm only doing the top because I'm teaching you how to fix the bubbles, damaged particle board, and I'm not, the video is not about refinishing this dresser. So watch my channel, subscribe to my channel, and when I finish this dresser, you'll see the video. I don't know what I'm going to do with this dresser. I'm sure it's going to look absolutely fantastic when I'm done with it, especially since the top's going to be in perfect condition. Bye. So here it is. I think it's absolutely beautiful. You could never tell that it had been severely damaged. And as you could see in the video, it's really a very simple process. The final finish was sanded, and so it's very smooth when you run your hand over it. As I look at it, I can see some brush marks, but that's acceptable to me because the finish is very smooth to touch. If you did not want those minimal brush marks, then use spray products for everything listed, all 3 different products that I used. I really appreciate your watching my video. If you got anything out of this video, please give it a thumbs up. I also appreciate subscribers, so you'll be notified about future videos as I release them. I try to release 2 a week. You can see I have lots of work behind me. The name of my channel is Furniture Flipping for Profit, and that's what I do. I refinish, restore, and restyle furniture and then flip it for a profit. As I mentioned at the beginning, this dresser was so damaged, I got it for $8. And watch a future video as I finish the rest of the bottom here. We know the top is gorgeous, and I know I'm going to end up painting it white since I did the top in white. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest, so stay tuned and you can see that. Thanks for watching. Bye.